right, I'm back to present the withdrawal of consent and loss to follow-up. So there is now a site-facing policy on the ECOG-ACRIN website. If you go to the website and you go to policies and manuals, I also have the link here. And what it covers is our policy for withdrawal of consent, if a patient becomes lost to follow-up, and if an institution becomes lost to follow-up. So one thing, we'll go into the A and B more in detail, but for institution loss to follow-up, that's really for instances where a site is closing or there's any other issues like that. It's not a way to close out a specific study. That would be using the CTSU early site closure form. All right, so there's a lot of information here, but the first thing we want to specify is that when we submit the withdrawal of consent form in RAVE, and when we talk about withdrawal of consent form within that EDC, we are specifically talking about patients that are withdrawing full clinical consent to have further data collected and submitted for the trial. If a patient just wants to come off treatment, or if they're refusing specific assessments or anything like that, we won't be using the form. So the form can be added in one of two ways, depending on the depending on the study setup. So for older studies, it's added using the Add Event feature, which is on the patient homepage. That's where the COVID form is and the loss to follow-up form. So you would just navigate to their homepage, use the drop-down box. You can add the withdrawal of consent form. If you don't see it there, that means it's a newer study, and we've actually set it up to roll out automatically. So if the patient is already in follow-up, on the long-term follow-up forms, we have a question at the beginning that asks if the patient has changed their consent, and if so, it will roll out the form. And then if a patient comes off treatment and at that time they're withdrawing full consent, if you use the withdrawal by subject option, then it will roll out the withdrawal of consent form. I know that's a change from before. For older studies, the withdrawal option would be just for patient refusal as well, but now moving forward, the withdrawal by subject should only be used when the patient's withdrawing consent. So as I mentioned, we really want to focus on the difference between the patient withdrawing consent and just discontinuing treatment or refusing any clinical assessments. And then you can refer to the form completion guidelines on the CTSU website if you're having any trouble accessing the form. How to get there will be listed on that document. All right, so next for loss to follow-up, the document outlines our policy and our requirements. So our requirement is that the patient is unable to be contacted for at least 2 years, and that 3 or more attempts using different methods were made to contact the patient. When we are, so that's the criteria. So once the form is approved, you won't need to submit anything in RAVE, but until that approval happens, you should continue to submit the long-term follow-up folders, and you can just enter the expected report periods, and then you can use the date last known for the vital status, just so we have documentation that you are still collecting or completing the forms, and there's just no new information. So here I have the patient's homepage. So I'm showing here the Add Event drop-down menu. You can see that the loss to follow-up form is an option. And so now you can see I have a screenshot of the loss to follow-up form. So when you are completing the form, you want to make sure that you enter the date, last known date of contact on the form, right there. And then below it in the log table, you need to report at least 1 attempt. You don't need to report all 3 attempts that are required for approval, but we really just need that most recent one. And that most recent one has to be at least 2 years from the date of last contact that you're reporting on that form. So we do check that. Most of the times that we're not able to approve it is because that 2-year duration hasn't been met, or the most recent attempt wasn't made past that 2-year time point. So another attempt needs to be documented before we can approve it. And that is all I have. Thank you.